The storm outside is nothing compared to the one raging within. For Violet Lawrence, the thunder is just a background noise to her own exhaustion. She looks into the distance with eyes that have seen too much, her spirit finally fractured beyond repair. 3 years. She endured 3 years in a gilded cage, and now the only way out is in the palm of her hand. The decision is quiet, devoid of the drama the world expects from a princess, just a final, desperate gulp. She washes away the bitterness of the pills with wine, hoping it will finally drown out the memories of everything she lost. The world mocked her, used her, and threw her away. She's simply too tired to care anymore. The bottle slips from her fingers, a hollow thud marking the end of her resistance. As she falls back onto the sheets, the weight of her life finally begins to lift, replaced by a cold, heavy silence. In her final moments, she wonders how it all fell apart. There isn't even anyone left to say goodbye to. She wasn't always this broken. She was born the sole princess of Le Crown, a name that once commanded respect. Her childhood was a portrait of perfection, a blessed existence surrounded by family and prestige. She was the darling of the palace, running through halls lined with gold, never imagining that the gold would one day run out. Then came the wedding. The day she got her life was beginning, but instead it was the start of her slow demise. She smiled through the veil, a naive girl believing in a fairy tale that was actually a business transaction. But all of that is in the past now. The light is fading, and the memories are drifting away like autumn leaves. One last tear escapes, a final farewell to a life that promised so much and gave so little. The tragedy began 3 years ago. The royal family's business ventures collapsed, leaving the crown in total chaos. The people weren't just angry, they were bloodthirsty. They demanded the royals pay for the nation's ruin with their lives. The castle was no longer a sanctuary. It was a fortress under siege by a starving, rioting public. Terrified and drowning in debt, the family searched for any lifeline to keep their heads above water. That lifeline appeared in the form of a man the nobility despised, but the treasury desperately needed: Winter Blooming, the illegitimate son of a duke, born to an outlander mother and a man who had everything to prove. Because of his bloodline, he was denied the inheritance he deserved. He was a man with no status, despite his immense capability. But what he lacked in title, he made up for in sheer, ruthless wealth. He was a master of coin in a kingdom that was broke. In Lockerant, there are only 2 ways to climb the social ladder. You either inherit power or you buy it. Inheritance was a closed door for Winter, leaving him with only one remaining option: marriage, a contract that would trade his vast fortune for the one thing money couldn't buy: a royal title. The deal was struck: a diamond ring for a kingdom's survival, a marriage built on a ledger rather than love. Winter gave up his entire fortune, pouring his life's work into the bottomless pit of the royal debt. In exchange, he received the hand of the princess. He was to be the savior of the crown, and in return, he would become a nobleman. The wedding was a spectacle of false hope, a grand display to hide the fact that the monarchy was being sold. The priest pronounced them husband and wife, binding a man who wanted a title to a woman who just wanted peace. They stood together at the altar, a perfect image of a union that was, in reality, a desperate gamble. Violet looked at her new husband, her heart fluttering with a hope she didn't know she still had. He was handsome, commanding, and far more charming than the rumors had suggested. As he slid the ring onto her finger, she felt a spark of genuine affection, wondering if maybe, just maybe, this could be real. She was blushing, her eyes wide with the sudden, overwhelming realization that she might actually be falling for him. Who would have thought that a business arrangement would lead to love at first sight? She watched him, her heart beating fast, praying that he might eventually feel the same way about her. But Winter remained a mystery, his face a mask of cool professionalism, even in the middle of their wedding reception. She reached out to him, wanting to bridge the distance between them, to make him more than just a business partner. She told him how fortunate she felt to have met him, her voice trembling with a sincerity he didn't seem prepared for. She was radiant, her joy filling the room, oblivious to the storm that her own family was about to unleash. Winter looked away, his expression unreadable. He wasn't there for romance, he was there for the payoff. A tense silence hung between them, broken only by the sound of a spoon clinking against a glass. The reception came to a halt as a figure stepped forward to address the crowd. It was time for the toast. The wine was poured, the guests waited, and the atmosphere shifted from celebration to something much more calculated. Violet's brother, Ash, took the center stage, a smile on his face that didn't quite reach his eyes. He began by thanking everyone for coming, and specifically mentioning the enormous sum Winter had paid. Violet felt a twinge of embarrassment. Why was he bringing up the money now? It felt so transactional, so cold. But Ash wasn't finished. He announced that the royal family wanted to apologize to the nation for the crisis. The room went silent as he delivered the killing blow. The royal family was being dissolved immediately. All authority was being handed over to the parliament. The monarchy, and the titles that came with it, were no more. Violet stared in horror as her brother effectively stripped her husband of the very thing he had just bought. The realization hit Winter like a physical blow. He had paid millions for a title that had just vanished into thin air. The whispers began immediately. The guests sneered, relishing the sight of the outlander being scammed by the royals. Winter's hand tightened around his glass, his knuckles white, his fury simmering just beneath the surface. The glass shattered, red wine spilling like blood across the floor, a perfect metaphor for the destruction of their deal. Violet flinched, the sound of the breaking glass echoing the sound of her own heart shattering. She reached out to him, but he was already gone, his presence replaced by a cold, radiating anger. Winter turned his back on her, walking away from the woman who was now the face of the family that had betrayed him. She was left standing alone, a princess of nothing, married to a man who now had every reason to hate her. The crowd applauded Ash's wisdom, oblivious to the personal tragedy they were witnessing. Ash stood there looking like a hero, while his sister's life was being systematically dismantled. Violet stood in the middle of the ballroom, her white dress a cruel reminder of the future she thought she had. She looked around at the faces of the people who had once bowed to her, now seeing only mockery and contempt. The blooming family members erupted in rage, shouting that they had been swindled, their voices filled with venom. They lunged for her, their hands grasping at her dress, demanding their money back as if she were a common thief. Violet screamed, the weight of the betrayal and the hatred of the crowd finally crushing her. This wasn't just a wedding, it was the beginning of the end. 3 years. That is how long I have been a prisoner in this house, living a life that feels more like a debt than a marriage. I ran through the halls, my bare feet hitting the cold floor, desperate to catch the one person who was supposed to be my partner. But Winter didn't even look back. To him, I was just another appointment, an inconvenience in his busy schedule. I begged him for just one more night, one single evening where he could stand by my side at his mother's party. His response was as cold as the winter he was named after. He told me to go alone or just lie and say I was sick. Time is money to a man like him, and apparently I am a very poor investment. The servants watched from the shadows, their whispers following me like a shroud. They knew exactly where I stood in his heart. I tried to reach out, to find some shred of the man I thought I married, but he only pulled away with a look of pure disdain. He reminded me of the millions he spent to buy my family's status, as if I were nothing more than a piece of fine jewelry he now regretted purchasing. His ultimatum was simple: pay him back, grant him nobility, or stay quiet and stay out of his way. I bit my lip to keep from crying out. How do you pay back a man who has already taken everything you are? I grabbed his arm one last time, pleading for a single day of his time, as if my life depended on it. I looked into his eyes, searching for a spark of warmth, but I found only a void. He looked at me with a silence that was louder than any scream. He had already made his choice long ago. He brushed my hand off as if I were a speck of dust on his sleeve. With a final, dismissive click of his tongue, he turned his back on me for good. I watched him walk toward the carriage, the gap between us growing into an unbridgeable canyon. A dark, hollow thought settled in my chest. If I died today, would this man even bother to show up at my funeral? Even the household physician, Rickman, treated me with the same professional indifference as his master. I told him about the pain, the physical ache that mirrored the one in my soul, but he only saw a spoiled princess pretending to be ill. He sighed, accusing me of feigning illness to avoid my duties, while the maids snickered in the corner. He warned me to stop lying, threatening to tell Winter's mother if I didn't get up and play my part. I realized then that in this house, my truth meant nothing. I was a puppet whose strings were being pulled by people who hated me. I needed a change. I needed to see something different in the mirror, even if it was just the length of my hair. The carriage arrived to take me to the lion's den. Blue roses lined the path, a beautiful mockery of the life I was living. I stepped out, my new, shorter hair fluttering in the breeze. I felt lighter, but the air was still heavy with judgment. The whispers started immediately. They didn't even try to hide their mockery. They laughed at my choice, calling my long hair a hassle they were glad to be rid of. Every word was a tiny needle under my skin. I didn't want to be there. I knew there was no place for me among these people who thrived on my misery. I felt a jolt of fear as I saw my mother-in-law, Catherine, and her son, Diev, approaching. Catherine smiled, but her eyes were cold. She pretended to be worried, masking her venom with a performative concern. I tried to explain, to find an excuse, but the doctor chose that exact moment to announce my arrival to the crowd. He called me out in front of everyone, his voice booming with the lie that I had been faking my illness. Catherine let out a sharp, cruel laugh, relishing the moment my dignity was stripped away in public. The room turned into a blur of grinning faces and pointed whispers. I was the deceitful princess, the con artist who didn't want to attend a party. They mocked my delicate upbringing, turning my very identity into a joke to be shared over champagne. I felt the tears stinging my eyes. The fall of a princess was the best entertainment they'd had all year. The sun began to set, painting the sky in colors I could no longer appreciate. I stood alone on the balcony, praying for the night to end, praying for the world to stop turning for just a moment. Then came Diev, his presence an oily stain on the evening. He noticed I was alone, and he took pleasure in it. I turned away, but there was nowhere to run. He moved closer, his voice dripping with false sympathy. He touched my hair, his smile widening as he saw me flinch. He knew exactly how much power he had over me. The scarf I wore felt like a noose. Everything about this place was suffocating me. He reveled in my humiliation, mocking me for being left behind by a husband who didn't care. He leaned in, his breath hot against my ear, telling me I had no dignity left to save. He was right, but it still hurt like a physical blow. I snapped, telling him he was out of line, but my voice was weak and trembling. He just laughed, calling me an ignorant princess and telling me to make smarter choices. He knew Winter was never coming home. I walked away as fast as I could, the sound of his laughter following me down the corridor. He watched me go with a predatory glint in his eye. He wasn't finished with me, and I knew it. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't exist in this skin for one more second. I found the bottle and the pills. It was the only way to make the noise stop, to finally find the peace everyone denied me. I lay on the bed, watching the storm rage outside, the thunder matching the chaos in my mind. I was done being their punching bag. I thought of my happy past, a time when a smile didn't feel like a mask I had to wear. And then I thought of the hellish marriage that replaced it, the grinning masks of the people who broke me. I reached out to the memory of Winter, the man I tried so hard to love, and the man who never loved me back. A single tear fell as I whispered my final farewell to the world that had abandoned me. My hand went limp, the ring on my finger the last thing I felt before the darkness took over. But then there was light. It was soft and warm, not at all like the coldness I expected from death. I felt refreshed, as if the pain and fatigue had been washed away. If this was heaven, it was far more beautiful than I imagined. I smiled, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. I was finally free. But as I opened my eyes, I saw a familiar face, a face that was smiling back at me with a warmth it never showed in life. I let out a gasp, my heart hammering against a chest that felt different, stronger, larger. I reached for my throat, but the sound that came out was a deep, low rumble. It wasn't my voice. I looked at my hands. They were large, calloused, and masculine. These were not my hands. I touched my face, feeling the stubble on my jaw, my mind reeling in total shock. Panic set in. This wasn't heaven. This was something else entirely. What had happened to me? I looked down at the bed and my breath hitched in my throat. There, lying still and pale, was me. I was looking at my own body, the woman I used to be, from across the room. The ring on the finger was the same, but everything else had changed. I wasn't the princess anymore. I was him. Broad shoulders, a solid frame, and skin that feels entirely too tight. This isn't my body. The reflection staring back at me has jet black hair and piercing gray eyes. It's a face I've looked at with longing and fear for years. There's no way this is real. I've become my husband. I've become winter blooming. My panic is cut short by a violent bang on the door. A voice shouts for the president to open up. A man enters carrying tea and clothes, as if a door being nearly kicked down is a normal morning occurrence. This is Hayel, Winter's secretary. He's already lecturing me about being late, which is apparently a cardinal sin in this house. He tosses a suit onto the bed, demanding I get ready for a formal occasion immediately. I can barely process his words, let alone the task. When I finally speak, my voice is deep and resonant. Hell stops, looking at me with sudden, sharp suspicion. I try to play it off, but I have no idea what happened yesterday, or what he means by me going overboard. He mentions coffee beans and a man named Rowell. My mind is racing, trying to piece together a professional life I was never allowed to see. I'm standing here, trapped in his skin, while the world expects me to lead an empire I don't understand. I managed to ask him to step outside so I could change. The thought of being exposed in this state is terrifying. Hayel looks genuinely disturbed by my request. He asks if this is some kind of punishment. Is the real Winter usually this much of a monster? I struggle with the tie, my fingers clumsy in these larger, calloused hands. Every movement feels foreign and heavy. The meeting is starting. Hayel warns me not to get angry, no matter how much this Rowell character irritates me today. Then comes the most bizarre instruction of all. Don't throw the table. Does he really resort to such violence? I always saw him as a man of ice, cold and calculating, but apparently there's a volatile fire beneath that surface. We enter the drawing room. The air is thick with the scent of expensive tobacco and the weight of unspoken threats. Rowell sits across from me, looking smug and far too comfortable. I can't let my guard down for a second. I scan the papers, trying to look like I understand the numbers and the power plays hidden within the fine print. Rowell starts talking, his voice dripping with a false, oily politeness. He thinks he can squeeze more money out of us. He raises the price of the coffee beans significantly, citing costs I suspect are completely fabricated. I try to be reasonable, pointing out that we already have a signed contract. My heart hammers against a chest that isn't mine. He laughs it off, mentioning the success of Winter's hotel chain. He thinks money is no object to a man like Winter. A success? Did Winter actually recover the fortune he lost when we married? I had no idea. Or am I just delusional, hoping there was some hidden triumph in the middle of our shared misery? I remember the crushing guilt I felt, believing my family's ruin had dragged him into the dirt with us. That's why I tolerated his neglect. I thought I owed him my silence as penance for his lost wealth. Rowell keeps pushing, claiming he won't be able to pay the children working for him if I don't agree to his new terms. Children? The word hits me like a physical blow. I can't hide the shock written all over my husband's face. I reach for the stamp, ready to just end this and give him what he wants for the sake of those kids. Hayel grabs my arm, stopping me before I can make a massive mistake. He tells Raoul I've had too much to drink. He whispers harshly in my ear, asking if I'm actually hungover. He can't believe I'm being this soft and naive. He reminds me that Raoul is leveraging Winter's own past, a past spent being worked to death as a child laborer. Raoul is a predator who would never pay those children a fair wage. I was about to line the pockets of a monster. I realized then that I have no idea how the real Winter would handle a man like this. Hayel is baffled. Usually Winter would have thrown the table at the second Raoul opened his mouth. He calls for a reschedule. He clearly thinks I'm broken or perhaps just completely drunk. I stand up, feeling the weight of Winter's reputation. I have to act. I have to be the man they expect me to be. I look Raoul in the eye, trying to channel that cold, terrifying energy that used to make me flinch. I grab the edge of the heavy marble table. My muscles strain under the effort of this new, powerful body. With a loud thud, I tilt it. Raoul jolts back, his face turning a satisfying shade of pale. Again, with such violence, he stammers. This is the man they fear. This is the routine they know. But as I look at his trembling hands, I realize this isn't right. This isn't how I solve things. I set the table back down and pick up the documents. Conversation is my strength, not mindless destruction. I tell him we're starting over, not with threats, but with a resolution we can both actually agree on. Winter would have used fear. But I am Violet Lawrence, and I will see this negotiation through my way. I've spent my life enduring ridicule and living like a ghost. I know how to stay in one place and hold my ground. Staying in one place and enduring, that is what I do best. It's time I used that strength. I won't stop until we find common ground, or until Raoul realizes he can't manipulate me. Meanwhile, back at the estate, the service bells are ringing incessantly, ignored by everyone. The maids share a look of pure disdain. They've decided the Duchess is just whining again and chose to ignore her. In my bedroom, Winter, in my body, is pulling the cord with a growing, frantic frustration. He's surrounded by empty bottles, his head splitting from a physical pain he's never had to endure before. He stumbles out to the balcony, seeing the doctor, Rickman, talking to the staff below. He calls out, his voice sharp and demanding, a tone that has never once come from my lips. He demands treatment, but the doctor just looks up with an expression of bored, practiced annoyance. Rickman insists there's nothing wrong, just like he always does. He thinks I'm just looking for attention. Winter grabs the doctor's arm, his grip far stronger than anyone ever expects from the fragile Duchess. The doctor sneers, asking how much longer I plan on pretending to be sick. He has no idea who he's talking to. Winter's teeth grit. The blatant disrespect and the medical negligence, it's more than he can stand. Before Rickman can finish his insult, he's jerked forward with a force that leaves him breathless. Winter clenches the man's lapels, his eyes burning with a fury that doesn't belong in my gentle reflection. He has a world to conquer and no patience for a doctor who refuses to do his job. The game has changed. Winter isn't used to being powerless. Even trapped in Violet's fragile, trembling body, he knows that money is the ultimate equalizer. He doesn't ask for help, he buys obedience. He throws the stacks of cash at the doctor like a common insult. If he can't have his own strength, he'll use his wealth to bend this man to his will. The doctor, Rickman, is terrified. He's never seen the princess like this. She was always the mouse, the quiet victim. But now her eyes burn with a predatory coldness. Winter's soul is screaming inside this weak frame. He needs to get to the capital, to his own resources, and he'll threaten every life in this room to make it happen. But the body is failing him. Every sharp movement sends a wave of nausea and pain through his chest. It's a physical manifestation of the misery Violet lived in every single day. Rickman can't wrap his head around it. This woman knows the code to a safe even the staff weren't allowed to touch. The power dynamic of the household has shifted in an instant. He sees a fire in her eyes that wasn't there before, a lethal, calculating gaze that belongs to a businessman, not a neglected royal. The confusion is turning into genuine fear. Madame Violet is acting like she owns the world, and for the first time, the staff feels the weight of her authority. She used to be so quiet, so easy to ignore. Now her presence fills the room with a suffocating, icy pressure. Winter stumbles, his head throbbing. He hates this. He hates the weakness, the sway of the floor, and the way his vision blurs with every heartbeat. When he demands coffee, he doesn't ask for the tea a princess would prefer. He wants it hot, black, and bitter, just like his usual routine. The preparation is hurried, the staff scrambling to meet the demands of a woman they no longer recognize. He gulps it down, the heat stinging his throat, but the familiarity of the ritual is the only thing keeping him grounded. Philippe, the servant, watches in stunned silence. The way she holds the cup, the way she drinks, it's a perfect mirror of Sir Winter. With a sharp tack, he sets the cup down. The performance is over. It's time for results. He barks orders for a train ticket, refusing to be confined to this room for another second. He has a life to reclaim. He growls at their incompetence. To Winter, everyone is moving in slow motion, hampered by a lack of urgency he finds intolerable. He grips his head, cursing the fragile vessel he's been shoved into. How did she live like this? How did she survive with a body that feels like it's constantly breaking? He looks around at the empty bottles and the scattered pills. The realization is beginning to sink in. She wasn't just sad, she was at the end of her rope. The truth is undeniable now. He has switched bodies with Violet. The woman he ignored, the woman he thought was just a refined princess, was living a nightmare he's now forced to inhabit. Winter reflects on his past hardships. He's been a slave. He's been experimented on. He's clawed his way up from the dirt. He tells himself this is just another obstacle. He has survived witches and monsters. He can certainly survive being a woman. But his confidence is a mask for the growing unease in his gut. He touches the short, jagged ends of his hair. It took her long enough to finally cut it. It took her a lifetime to finally take something for herself. His mind drifts back to last winter, a time when things were simpler, and his cruelty was just a matter of habit. Violet had been so happy then, beaming at the prospect of 4 days together. She was desperate for a crumb of his time, a single dinner that wasn't interrupted by work. He had been his usual self, cold, distant, already thinking about the capital before the first course was even served. She had looked at him with such hope, her eyes bright with a love he didn't know what to do with, so he chose to ignore it. She asked him if her hair was too long. It was a plea for him to notice her, to give her some direction, some sign that he cared about her appearance. He gave her the answer that probably broke her. Do whatever you want. He thought he was being generous. He didn't realize he was being indifferent. He didn't want the responsibility of her choices. He wanted her to be a silent, beautiful fixture in his home that required no maintenance. He never saw the light die in her eyes that night. He never saw the moment she realized she was truly alone in their marriage. She didn't cut her hair then. She held on to it, a long, golden reminder of a woman who was still trying to be what she thought he wanted. In the present, Winter watches the staff clean the room, his mind heavy with the memory of his own negligence. After that night, she stopped asking questions. She stopped trying. He thought she had finally learned her place, but she had actually just given up. He takes the medicine Rickman provided, the liquid bitter on his tongue. It's a small mercy for a body that has known so little. He dismisses the maid with a sharp word. He can't stand the way they look at him, with a mix of pity and confusion. The memories of Violet's smiling face haunt him. He wonders what the problem was, still unable to fully grasp the depth of the wound he inflicted. He lies back, exhausted. He can't understand her. He can't understand why she stayed, or why she finally decided to leave. Meanwhile, in the capital, the man who looks like Winter is surrounded by the debris of a long night. Empty bottles and expensive cigars litter the table. Violet, now inhabiting Winter's powerful body, groans as she's woken up. The strength of this frame is intoxicating, but the lifestyle is draining. She looks at the mess she's made. She's been working for 2 days straight, using Winter's reputation to secure the future of his company. Her assistant brings her coffee, praising her for the amazing performance yesterday. She played the part of the ruthless businessman perfectly. She had even learned to handle his cigars, a skill she never thought she'd need. It was all part of the mask. She remembers the look on Raoul's face when she used proper cigar etiquette, a subtle display of noble upbringing that Winter, of lowly birth, shouldn't have known. She used her royal heritage to win a battle Winter couldn't. She turned his weakness into a weapon, mocking the very people who looked down on him. The shock on Raoul's face was a small victory. For once, being a princess was actually useful in a world of men. Her assistant is ecstatic. They secured a massive contract, and Raoul was sent packing like a whimpering coward. She did it. She saved the deal. She proved that she could handle his world, even if he never bothered to understand hers. Violet realizes that living in this fantasy, having this power, isn't so bad. It's better than the life she left behind. For a moment, she hopes she never wakes up. She hopes this dream of strength and respect lasts forever. But reality intrudes. A telegraph arrives from Winter's mother, Madame Catherine, a reminder that even in this body, there are family obligations she can't escape. The coffee is scalding and too sweet, a reminder of the physical differences she's still adjusting to. The message from his mother is even more jarring. She's told to compliment Violet for cutting her hair. It's a superficial request that highlights how little anyone in this family actually knows her. The assistant wonders why Violet doesn't want to get along with the household. To him, she's just being difficult. Violet doesn't care anymore. She spent too many years worrying about what people think only to be met with disregard. Winter never accompanied her to parties. He never stood by her side. He was always too busy with work to notice the ridicule she endured for his sake. He wouldn't have sided with her anyway. He saw her as a transaction, money for nobility, a debt to be paid, not a wife to be loved. Everything was always her fault in his eyes. Every social failure, every moment of unhappiness was just another reason for him to stay away. I don't care what my wife does. Those words echo in her mind. He was so indifferent that he didn't even realize he was losing her. The assistant is confused by her silence. He doesn't see the pain behind the powerful facade she's wearing. Suddenly, a loud bam echoes through the hallway. Someone is forcing their way in, disregarding every rule of the house. Violet stands up, startled. Who would dare to interrupt her now? The news that Madame Violet is here sends a shock through the room. It shouldn't be possible. Violet's heart hammers in Winter's chest. Is this how the dream ends? Is the real Winter coming to take back his life? Outside, Winter, in Violet's body, is shoving past the maids. He's done waiting. He's done playing the part of the fragile princess. He bursts through the doors with a strength that defies the body he's in. He's here for answers, and he's here for his life. He stands before her, his eyes cold and demanding. "Hello, Winter," he says, using his own name like a weapon. "Isn't there something we need to speak about in private?" The two of them stare at each other, the roles completely reversed. The man who didn't care and the woman who cared too much are finally face to face, and nothing will ever be the same. The hallways of the mansion are thick with the sound of hushed whispers and frantic footsteps. Hayal stops in his tracks as a servant approaches him with wide, trembling eyes. Philippe is completely out of breath, his face pale as he tries to deliver the news. He explains that Madame Violet didn't wait for a formal entrance. She ran with every bit of strength she had the moment she stepped off the carriage. The staff is in a frenzy, wondering why their usually reserved mistress is acting with such desperate urgency. They can't understand what could have possibly changed her so drastically in such a short time. A single bead of sweat rolls down, reflecting the tension vibrating through the house. The question hangs in the air. Why is she so desperate to see Sir Winter? Behind these closed doors, a reality far beyond their comprehension is unfolding. A hand reaches for the latch, the click of the door sounding like a final verdict. Violet stands before him, her finger pointed in an accusation that is both terrified and demanding. Her eyes search his, looking for an explanation for the impossible phenomenon they just endured. A wine bottle clatters across the floor, a reminder of the chaos that preceded this moment. She grabs him, her voice trembling as she asks what he's done to her body. Suddenly, a sharp throb of pain lances through them both, a violent reaction to their proximity. They collapse, the weight of their own identities returning in a crushing wave. Violet sinks to the floor, her spirit broken as the realization sets in. She stares at her own hands, those pale, fragile fingers she had hoped to leave behind. The memory of their skin touching remains, the catalyst for the reversal. Winter looks at his own hand, his expression unreadable as he processes the shift. She confirms it with a whisper. They are back in their original bodies. For Violet, this isn't a relief. It's a return to the hell of being herself, trapped in a life of neglect. She's lost in her own despair until Winter's cold voice cuts through the silence, demanding she listen. He stands across the room, already distancing himself emotionally as he asks about the contract. Violet feels a familiar sting. Even after a literal soul-swapping experience, his mind is on business. She clenches her fist, berating herself for expecting a moment of genuine human connection. Winter continues, noting that the negotiations went almost too smoothly. Violet is taken aback. She managed to subdue a man known for being a ruthless cheapskate. Winter admits that the man is no pushover, his tone carrying a rare note of something like respect. Violet's heart flutters. She shouldn't get her hopes up, but this feels like the first compliment he's ever given her. She wonders if this incident might finally make him pay proper attention to her. She tries to brush it off, turning the conversation back to the mystery of their switch. She's encouraged by the fact that he's actually listening, a rare occurrence in their 3 years of marriage. She looks into his ash-gray eyes, searching for a clue in his heritage. She recalls that those eyes are a mark of the Conic tribe, a people with a long, storied history. She remembers rumors of shamanic magic associated with his bloodline. She blurts out the question, asking if his status as an outlander has anything to do with the supernatural switch. The air in the room suddenly turns frigid as Winter stiffens at the mention of his origins. His face contorts with a quiet fury. He asks if she thinks this happened because he's a lowly outlander. Violet is horrified, realizing she stepped onto a landmine of deep-seated insecurity. He sneers, assuming she's just like the rest of the arrogant royals who look down on his people. Violet tries to explain, but the words die in her throat as the old walls between them snap back into place. She covers her face, tears pricking her eyes. Every time she tries to get closer, she somehow makes it worse. The sway of the room and the emotional weight become too much to bear. She mumbles an apology, her voice small and broken, wishing they could just keep talking. Winter sighs, his frustration evident. He doesn't understand why she always reacts with such fragility. Before she can retreat further, he moves toward her with a sudden, decisive grace. Violet gasps in shock as he sweeps her off her feet, his strength a stark contrast to her weakness. The servants can only stare in stunned silence as the president carries his wife through the halls. He tells her that after dragging his own body around for a day, he knows exactly how exhausted she must be. He drops her onto his bed, the impact soft but the gesture firm. She struggles to protest, insisting she should go to a different room, but he won't hear it. He places a hand on the mattress, looming over her with an intensity that makes her breath catch. He points a finger at her, his voice blunt as he tells her that her body is a heavy burden. Violet is stunned. Even when he was a servant, he says, he never felt pain as constant as what she endures daily. He asks how she can even live in a body that feels like it's constantly failing. He turns away to fetch a doctor, his concern masked by his usual abrasive demeanor. Violet watches him go, the silence of the room amplifying her confusion. She tells herself not to get used to this sudden kindness. It's likely just a temporary side effect of the switch. The doctor arrives shortly after, the cold metal of the stethoscope pressing against her skin. He confirms what Winter felt. Her heart is in a truly terrible condition. He questions the medicine she's been taking, his brow furrowed in deep concern. He reveals that the old medicine is outdated and only worsens her chronic migraines. Violet realizes with a jolt that the doctor her family provided was likely a fraud intended to keep her weak. She feels a small sense of relief knowing that at least one part of her constant pain can be treated. She tries to get up, wanting to move to another bedroom before Winter returns. She can't bear the thought of him seeing her as a burden any longer than necessary. But the next morning brings a surprise that shatters her plans for isolation. Violet wakes up to find her room filled with maids and a mountain of new, vibrant clothes. She stands in the doorway, completely dazed by the sudden transformation of her space. The head maid, Lulu, beams at her, announcing that they need to choose the perfect outfit. Violet can only blink in shock. She has a lunch date with her husband, a man who, until yesterday, barely looked her way.